Bradley is so eager to have the gospel for next Sunday read that he read it again. But that's okay. You have the correct gospel in your leaflet, and that's what I will be talking about. That in the wisdom passage that we had as our first reading. But I want to just say a few things about the text from Thessalonians. How many of you either read or watched one of the Left Behind series? Oh, there's a couple. Well, don't go and buy it and don't read it. But that series is based on this text from Thessalonians because it interpreted a literal reading about the end of time as it was envisioned by Paul in this letter. Now, you got to remember that the early church believed that the second coming, the coming again of Jesus, was going to happen in their lifetime. And they were eager for that to happen. Because Jesus had lived and worked and walked amongst the people. He died. He rose again. And the ascension story, at least according to Luke, was Jesus said, or the angel said, he is coming again in the same fashion. Now, the other thing you have to understand is the mindset of the people about the world as they knew it was not based on what modern physics tells us. That is, they did not know that the universe was billions of years old, came about after the Big Bang, and that indeed our own solar system is over 1 billion years old. They thought of the earth as this is the earth, the planet Earth, flat, and heaven was above, and Jesus ascended up into heaven, and so he's going to descend down from heaven, the second coming, the parousia. Well, we have a whole different understanding about the world. Even though there are a good number of evangelical Christians who still believe the second coming is imminent. And you can still go, if you wish, to conversations or services or whatever where that track will be interpreted. But it's not the way to read this text from 1 Thessalonians. It's a misinterpretation of it, I would submit. Rather, Paul was trying to say the focus is not on the end and a cataclysmic end, because that's, the way it was presented, but rather it's a new beginning. The second coming is a new beginning. It's Jesus coming again to continue the beginning that happened when you first were converted and is going to continue on in your life. That's a very different slant than what is given in the Left Behind series. So, when you read that or read any other text, or somebody says to you, are you ready for the rapture? You know the answer to give them, right? All right, now, back to the correct gospel, the story of the 10 bridesmaids. It parallels two groups of 5. They all are bridesmaids. They all are waiting and anticipating the coming of the bridegroom. Now, just to set this into a little bit of different context than what you're used to with weddings. Weddings in the time of Jesus was a 2-stage kind of affair. The first stage was what we now think of engagement, where the couple was committed to each other. These are usually arranged marriages between two families. And while the couple was engaged and legally married, they were not fully married in that they weren't living together. So the marriage ceremony that this parable picks up on is the second stage. And this was a pretty big, elaborate event. You know the story of Jesus turning the water into wine in John's Gospel? How much water are we talking about?
700 gallons.
Yeah, it's a big party. It's a long party. Because it happened in this way. On the beginning of it, the bride is in her home, waiting for the bridegroom. And the bridegroom may come, when he's supposed to come, but it might be like one of these weddings where it's supposed to begin at 3 o'clock and the bridegroom or the groom isn't even there yet. So the bridegroom may come to the house, when he's supposed to, and he might come quite a bit later because he's partying with his buddies. Or who knows what. But finally, when he comes, the bridesmaids accompany him and the bride to the groom's house. Now, we're not talking about going across Grand Rapids, but, it's going from one house to another house. And it's at the groom's house that the party begins. And it can go on for several days. Hence why you need all this wine that Jesus turned from water, because it's a long-term kind of thing. So that's the setting for this story. Now we have these two sets of bridesmaids. We call them wise and foolish. Those probably are not good terms. But the wise ones were prepared for a delay. And so therefore they had their lamps with the oil, but they anticipated that maybe the groom, like other grooms, was not going to come on time. And so they had extra oil. Hence they are called the wise ones. And the other ones didn't do that extra preparation, and because he was delayed, they ran out of oil. Now, incidentally, in the biblical story, in this gospel story as well as elsewhere, light is always a symbol of illumination. Light is a symbol of taking something from the dark and bringing it into focus, into vision. It's a certain way of looking at the unconscious, which is way down in there in us, our dark sides that we don't want to admit is there, and bringing them up into consciousness so we can see the light of day. So that's part of the symbolism of this story of light and the characters of light. And the wise ones, we'll continue to use that terminology, were prepared to bring light whenever the delay would occur. They would continue to provide light. The foolish ones did not. Well, what does this have to say about us? One of the things that I would like to suggest, some of you may know this book, maybe not. It came out in 1970 called The Kingdom Within by John Sanford. He takes this parable and a number of parables of Jesus and looks at them from the perspective of an inward journey, not an outward journey. And he suggests, and I think he's right on, that the difference between these two groups was that the wise ones did their inner work. When the event happened, whether it's the coming of the bridegroom or whether it's the disaster, they were prepared because they were tapped into that inner source. They had done their work, whereas the foolish ones had not. This correlates, by the way, with the first reading we had from the Wisdom of Solomon. Sophia, you know, this one right here on my stole. Sophia is the Greek word for that gets translated as wisdom. And by the way, if any of you read theology in the 70s and 80s, Sophia was a prominent reference point for feminist theologians, because they said what it did was to create an image of a feminine dimension of God that the all-male patriarchy that dominated theological conversations didn't have. And they looked at Sophia as really not different than the coming of the Holy Spirit in the New Testament. And if you read that text of wisdom, Sophia is calling, is yearning, is eager to give people wisdom. Wisdom taps into the same thing that Jesus' parable does. It's tapping into that inner source that you can only access by doing your work. Now, I'm not going to ask all of you what you do for your inner work. It'll take a little while. But whatever you do for your inner life, for your inner soul, that's what these texts are talking about. And it's only as you do that, as you nurture your inner work, your inner soul, will you be prepared for a celebration, like a wedding celebration, or be prepared for the kinds of disasters that we've heard all too often in our body politic. It's the world we live in. And it's only as we have that inner reservoir, that inner connectedness to Sophia, that we're going to be prepared.